2020 was a lot of things, but one thing it wasn't was good. This year gave us lockdowns, mask wearing, and social isolation. Cancelled concerts, closed cinemas, and delayed releases. The arts were strangled in 2020. Pubs, clubs, and music venues closed, never to be reopened again. People left with no choice but to re-watch the great performances of yesteryear and think back to better times. Anyway, something that I found that serves as a remedy after a steady diet of 2020, one of the few albums I felt the need to revisit, and one that stood just a slight cut above the rest, is none other than Fiona Apple's Fetch the Bolt Cutters. Simply put, Fetch the Bolt Cutters is a fantastic piece of music. It's artfully written, skillfully performed, beautifully weird, and powerfully captivating. It's an album that is progressive in parts and melodic in others, lyrically dense but also quirky, highly unique but also relatable, a modern classic, and Fiona Apple's strongest release to date. Right, so let's get into it. Opening track, I Want You to Love Me, sets the tone for the album, textbook Fiona Apple piano rock, which starts to build up and becomes a lot more manic and wild as the track progresses. This marks the separation of this album from Fiona's previous work, the jazzy, cabaret-inspired sounds of earlier albums, changing direction into something that is a lot more raw, experimental and complex. Second track, Shamika, introduces the percussion, which is one of the standout features of the album. Scattershot percussive elements where pretty much anything goes. You've got dogs barking, a chair, I don't know, a pair of curtains, whatever. If it's in Fiona Apple's house and it makes a sound, it's probably on here somewhere. Shamika follows the first song perfectly. The piano that carries the song sounds frantic, and this is complemented by the off-kilter drumming, noisy, scratchy guitar that drops in and out of the song, and the wash of cymbals to separate the completely chaotic verse from the quieter and calmer chorus. Completely attention-grabbing, and one of the album's most memorable moments. Next, title track, Fetch the Bolt Cutters, draws upon a consistent theme of the album's lyrical content, which is a desire for escape and freedom. This is applied to varying situations, for example, escaping an unpleasant encounter. Wanting to escape the harsh reality of an unjust societal issue. Relationships. Living with an illness. Finally, the last track, which seems to draw on getting the freedom to do whatever it is you want to do, without worrying about the rewards or consequences. In addition to the rawness of the lead vocals on songs like Newspaper, Heavy Balloon and Cosmonauts, I really like the harmonies and the layering of the backing vocals throughout. The third song has this good interweaving vocal that comes in from around the first chorus, Cosmonauts for her and drum set towards the end of the album as well, cacophonies of vocal texture, and a high point in the vocal production. The instrument production is quite off the cuff, varying a lot between different tracks and adding to the DIY aesthetic of the album. It's got a distinct personality, which sometimes can feel like a rarity these days. But bear in mind, it's also not the only album to have embraced a DIY or an experimental style. Nor is it the most experimental or left-of-field album that's ever been made, despite what some of its critics are saying. Back to Newspaper though, this is one of the more blunt and visceral songs. The use anything as a drum idea pushed to its furthest limits, and the deep low end in the production make the song stick out quite a lot. There's this two-note piano that is constant in the background throughout the entire song. It sounds like an alarm bell that's going off, creating this very high-strung, wiry mood that I thought worked brilliantly. This is contrasted sharply by Ladies, which has more of a sway to it and an overall uplifting feel and tone. Cosmonauts also, which starts from a single bass line and builds up to this brilliant climax. The sonic texture of this song, similar to Shamika, is another high point of the album. There's more of a spacey kind of ambience, created by layered vocal harmonies, as well as the background instrumentation. Electric guitars, slide guitars, electric harp, Wurlitzer, probably much more, but the result is a fantastic wall of sound, feeling as if the listener themselves will lift off into space, as the song seems to as it progresses. Heavy Balloon is a bit simpler, but it's well crafted and still engaging. I like the rhythm in this song and really like the lyrics and the vocals. If you took away the percussion, it's not that complicated a song. A lot of it is just the percussion with vocals. The second guitar part is just 2 bars that are looped, so this draws a lot of attention to the vocal melody as well as the subject matter, which also differs from a lot of the other songs on the album, dealing not with relationships or oppression, but with health. This song picks up towards the end as well, introducing a few more instruments towards the outro, which makes it feel a lot more robust and complete as a song. I felt this works a lot better than Rock of His, which is another of the more simpler songs, but doesn't really seem to go anywhere past its main idea and melody, which is repeated throughout. So that was more of a non-starter for me. For Her, towards the end of the album, experiments more with structure and sounds like several ideas and styles that have been combined to make one song. The song very noticeably shifts in pace several times. The drums here also start and stop. This one didn't work for me as much, but a lot has been said about the song's lyrical content, which makes for an uncomfortable listen. I just didn't really care that much for the rhythm in the first half of the song, and felt it depended too much on the shock and the gravity of the heavy lyric in the second half, but can understand why Fiona Apple didn't want to be esoteric here. The song as well is the most experimental structurally on the album, and the only song of its kind here, so it still feels like it has a place. I'd say all of the songs bar one stick to a fairly conventional structure. Fiona Apple certainly doesn't delve into the bizarre time signatures and tempo shifts that you might find in, say, math rock. Drum set, the following track, is essentially the polar opposite. It's simple and it's mellow. I really like the placement of this song. Overall, the placement of tracks throughout is executed really well. It's hard to accuse Fiona Apple of putting a foot wrong here. I felt this one and the final song are almost there in a way to not make the listener leave on such a low note. Despite how vitriolic a lot of the songs on this album are, the closing track, On I Go, brings more of a catharsis to finish up the album. This mantra of self-acceptance, of freeing yourself from whatever it is in the past and moving forward, doing whatever it is you want to do and not getting tied up in the negativity or judgment of others. And that's repeated and drilled in throughout the song, almost like an army march. I think that's the real takeaway from an album like Fetch the Bolt Cutters. The music on this record is unapologetically pure, uncorrupted by current and happening trends. It's defiant of a lot of conventions and brash. It exists for no other reason other than the creator's own passion and enjoyment in making it, rather than chasing the quick and easy paycheck. It's anchored solely on the music, not letting any other surrounding nonsense get in the way. The whole thing itself took 5 years to record, and Fiona Apple is quite a rarity in that regard, not rushing to churn out material. Her stuff is released when she wants it to be. Overall, I think if there's a message to be taken away from this album, then that's it, and it's a good one to have in 2020. On you go, do what you want to do, enjoy it, and be free.